Hey Dungeons & Dragons community, I love D&D, and 5th is my favorite edition, by far. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. I think we all agree a couple adjustments could make things even better. I've done a series of those adjustments, and I'm providing them anyone who wants them. There's no cost, feel free to download them, share them, and use them. In these videos I'm explaining how these adjustments work and why I made any decisions for the changes I made. Today I'm going to go through my changes for 8th level spells. As always, a link to the document is in the video description for your convenience. I recommend using my WordPress account so you can get access to the document as a PDF, as that will be easier to view on most devices. So as we talk about 8th level spells, we are nearing the end. Next week we'll be talking about 9th level spells, and that will be the end of the Treantmonk Variant for the Player's Handbook. Now 8th level spells can be a little bit disappointing. I find that if I'm playing a spellcaster, when I get to 3rd level spells, that's exciting. 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th all feel like reasonable power boosts from the level before, and then 8th level is a bit of a letdown. And I've been asked if I'm going to do something about that, and the answer is not really. I mean, that would require an entire overhaul of the system. That's not my intention here. These are just adjustments. So 8th level spells are probably going to remain a little bit disappointing. But what I do want to do is take some of those 8th level spells that don't work very well, that really don't belong on an 8th level spell list as they're written, or have other kinds of mechanical problems, and see what I can do to fix those problems. So this is 8th level spells, the Treantmonk Variant. Let's get going. So the first spell I want to talk about, this shouldn't be a surprise, is Control Weather. Control Weather, as it's written in the Player's Handbook, really has some issues. I mean, just imagine for a moment that you are a captain on a ship and you get caught in a storm. And that storm threatens to rip your ship to shreds. But fortunately for you, you brought an archmage on board that specializes in controlling the weather. So you go to talk to them and they say, yeah, I can totally fix that weather for you. Just give me a few hours. I mean, that's ridiculous. But that's exactly how control weather works. It is so slow. It seems to me that being able to control the weather in a method faster than it might just change on its own is perfectly appropriate for 8th level magic. I mean, if you watch a movie or read a book where magic is used to control the weather, you can see those storm clouds building unnaturally quickly. But with control weather as it's written, it is so gradual that you wouldn't even know magic is being used. So that is really what I figured control weather needed to do. I understand we don't want it to be instant. I understand we don't want it to be a combat spell. But they went for such extended durations that we can still significantly reduce those without getting into that territory. Because normally, as a spell is written, it might take you 40 minutes to go from clear skies to light clouds. And then it might take you another 40 minutes to go from light clouds to overcast. And then another 40 minutes to maybe get a light shower. That's ridiculous. This is an 8th level spell. It should be dramatic. It should appear like some massive, powerful magic is influencing the weather. So we are going to tighten that up a lot. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the casting time, reduce it from 10 minutes to 1 minute. That still keeps it in the non-combat range in terms of spell casting, but we're reducing that time frame by 10 times. The second thing we're going to do is every time we're changing a stage on the weather, so you want to go from clear to light clouds, instead of it taking a D4 times 10 minutes, it's just going to take a D4 minutes. So we're going to be able to change the weather conditions much, much more quickly in a way that feels like it's magical, but still slow enough that it is not something that we're going to be able to use in combat, for example. The next spell I want to talk about is Demiplane. Now, I like the Demiplane spell. I think it's one of the better 8th level spells, and it's not a spell that I think needs to be boosted, but there's one mechanical problem with it that we can fix fairly easily. Because the original spell, as it's written, says each time you cast a spell, you can create a new demiplane or have the shadowy door connect you to a demiplane you created with a previous casting of this spell. The issue with that is if you are already in a demiplane you created, then you have no way out. You can either go to a new demiplane, or you can have a door created that will go back into the demiplane that you're already in, but there's no way to get out. You're trapped. You're trapped forever unless you have something like a plane shift spell. And I figure the demiplane spell shouldn't trap the actual spellcaster. So now you can create a new demiplane or have the shadowy door that connected to a demiplane you created with a previous casting of the spell reappear. So that change in wording means that if you are in a demiplane and the spell has expired, so you're trapped in that demiplane, if you cast demiplane again, you can recreate the door that allowed you to enter the demiplane in the first place. It's not going to allow you to hop to a new plane, for example. It's going to take you back to where you were before. And that is the only change a figured demiplane needed. The rest of the spell is actually a good spell. The next spell I want to talk about is Dominate Monster. Now, Dominate Monster, I tend not to be a fan of these kinds of spells, but my big problem with this spell, same as my problem with Dominate Person, is that whenever the target of the spell takes damage, they get another saving throw. This could be many, many saving throws, even in a period of one round. And that goes off from other kinds of spells like that normally would limit you to one save per round. Now, when I changed Dominate Person, I gave one save per round, and then it was pointed out to me that then what's the point of a 1 hour duration, because you're never going to last that hour. What about for creatures that aren't going to be taking damage? Now they're going to get a saving throw every round. Doesn't that make the spell much worse? All those things, totally true, totally fair. And so I'm going to be changing the Dominate Person spell in the same way that I am changing the Dominate Monster spell right now. So now the way it's going to work is, if the target takes damage, it makes a new Wisdom saving throw against the spell. If the saving throw succeeds, the spell ends. The target cannot receive another saving throw this way until the beginning of its next turn. So we're going to reinitiate the idea that they only get a saving throw when they take damage, but we're going to limit that to one saving throw per round. The next spell I want to talk about is Earthquake, and Earthquake is just a disappointing spell. You cast Earthquake, and essentially what you get is a large area of difficult terrain with a knock prone effect. And with 8th level spells, we should be doing a hell of a lot more than that. Now, there is the possibility of fissures opening, but the DM chooses where they appear, so they may do nothing. Also, those fissures all appear on the first round when you cast a spell. So you're concentrating on this spell. This Earthquake is continuing, but nothing's really happening with those fissures. And then with structures, if there's a structure in the Earthquake, those things you can potentially destroy eventually. And there are some minor effects involved with that, in addition to the structure being destroyed. Now, destroying the structure, I guess, is kind of your primary purpose of the Earthquake, but it should be able to do more than that. Otherwise, it's really, really circumstantial. This is an Earthquake. It should be dramatic. There should be more here than some difficult terrain and people get knocked over. So what I decided to do in order to adjust this spell is to make the fissures a little bit more dramatic, as well to make the collapsing structures a little bit more dramatic. So now what's going to happen with the fissures is when you concentrate on this spell, you may open a fissure at the beginning of each of your turns in a location of your choice in the spell's area. Normally it's a d6 number of fissures and they all appear right away. Each fissure is d10 times 10 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and extends from one range of the spell's area to the opposite side. That's the same. Creatures standing on a spot where a fissure opens must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall in and takes falling damage of 1d6 bludgeoning for every 10 feet of depth of the fissure. Now, I included in that language, even though before I guess it's kind of implied that they would take falling damage, I just wanted to make it clear that falling damage takes place. A creature that successfully saves moves with the fissure's edge as it opens. Alternatively, and this is new, you may have a fissure grow rather than creating a new fissure, extending the width by 10 feet and the depth by d10 times 10 feet. Creature in the fissure must make a dexterity save or fall as normal, but on a successful save is able to hold on to the side of the fissure, remaining at the previous depth. And a fissure that opens beneath the structure causes it to automatically collapse. So a few things have changed there. The first thing I've changed is instead of it being a d6 number of fissures opening right away, it's up to one fissure per round that you're concentrating on this spell. But you get to select where they appear. That's new. It is clarified that creatures that fall in the fissure take falling damage, and you have the opportunity on subsequent rounds to increase the size of an existing fissure rather than create a new one. And then in terms of structures, I kept that mostly the same. If you are near a structure when it collapses, you have to make a saving throw, or you can take damage from that structure basically falling on you. Except instead of it doing 5d6 bludgeoning damage to you like it did before, it's going to do 12d6 bludgeoning damage. An entire structure is falling on your head. That should be more than 5d6 damage in my opinion. So that's all the changes I made to the Earthquake spell. So let's talk about our next spell, which is Incendiary Cloud. So Incendiary Cloud is just a terrible spell that creates a cloud of, it's like burning smoke. And it's about the size of a fireball, and you have it appear on a bunch of enemies. They take initial damage of 10d8 fire damage, then they leave the effect, and that's the end of it. And by the way, you're concentrating on this spell. But that's all that spell does. It also moves 10 feet away from you every round, so just in case those creatures are stuck in a location or something, at least they'll still get free, because you're going to have to move the cloud off of them. Truly an abysmal spell. Now, what I've done to change this spell, I actually didn't change the damage at all, or when a creature takes the damage at all. Instead, what I've done is I've added in each creature that is completely within the cloud at the start of its turn must make a Constitution saving throw due to the thick smoke and ash in the area. On a failed save, the creature spends its action that turn, choking and gasping for breath. Creatures that don't breathe automatically succeed on this saving throw. So this is similar language to what you get with a Stinking Cloud. So in addition to taking damage, creature can also have secondary effect of losing their action because they're busy choking and trying to breathe. And finally, the cloud moves up to 10 feet in a direction that you choose at the start of each of your turns. So you can keep the cloud in the same place, or you can move it. So creature has just escaped the cloud, and then you move it over them again. Once again, they're taking damage, and once again, they're making saving throws, or they're losing their action. So now the Incendiary Cloud actually does something. The next spell I want to talk about is Power Word Stun. Now, these Power Word spells are bad spells, because basically the way it works is you cast a spell, and if a creature has 150 hit points or less, they're stunned. Maybe for one round, maybe for more rounds. If they have 151 hit points, nothing happens. And as a player, we don't know how many hit points our enemies have, so this is really just a blind guess. We think a creature might have less than 150 hit points, and then we cast Power Word Stun, and either it works or it does nothing. I do not like that. So what I've done here is, if the target has 150 hit points or fewer, it is stunned. If it has more than 150 hit points, it must make a Constitution saving throw, or it's stunned. So now, if it has 150 hit points or less, spell works as normal. If it has more than 150 hit points, there's at least a chance the spell might do something. Now, there's a reasonable chance the thing it'll do is take one legendary resistance off the enemy, or maybe they'll make their saving throw, but at least there's a chance that something else might happen. So I do think that makes the spell a significant amount better. Next spell I want to talk about is Sunburst. Sunburst is a bad spell. 8th level did not get good blast spells, and Sunburst, basically, it is a spell that does 12d6 radiant damage, half as much on a failed save, and a chance of blinding those enemies, probably for one round, because we're giving them a saving throw every round to get rid of it. This is a Constitution saving throw. The only really good thing about a Sunburst is it is a huge area of effect. 60-foot radius is really big. But 12d6 damage for an 8th level spell is bad damage. Blinded for one round is a pretty minor effect for an 8th level spell. This is the kind of thing we can make happen with a 2nd level spell. So 8th level spells should be a lot more dramatic than that. So I've done two main things to pump up this spell. The first thing I've done is, before undead and oozes had disadvantage on their saving throws. So what I did is I also included creatures with sunlight sensitivity are also going to have disadvantage on the saving throws, and undead with a challenge rating of 4 or lower are automatically destroyed and disintegrated when they're hit with a Sunburst spell. This is an 8th level spell, perfectly reasonable that it's going to just wipe out the lesser undead. The second thing I've done is a creature blinded by the spell makes another Constitution saving throw after 1 minute has passed. So we're going to get at least 10 rounds of blinded if they fail that initial saving throw. On a successful save, it is no longer blinded. And that's it. So if they fail that second saving throw, they're blind. That's it. It's permanent. They can have it restored through a restoration spell, but they're not going to get their blindness back by succeeding on a saving throw anymore. So those are the two things I've done to boost up this spell. Number one, it's going to be more effective against undead and creatures with sunlight sensitivity. And number two, if you are blinded by this spell, it's going to last for a reasonable amount of time. The next spell that I dealt with was telepathy. Now, telepathy is kind of like the inferior version of Rary's telepathic bond, except it's an 8th level spell and it's not a ritual. The advantage of telepathy, of course, is that you can cast it and you can talk to anybody, anywhere on the same plane of existence. And that is a significant advantage. But I felt it needed even more. This is an 8th level spell. This is the ultimate telepathy spell. So what I've done here is basically I have completely removed the restriction of being on the same plane of existence. So now you can cast telepathy and you can talk to anybody, anywhere, even in a different plane of existence. You want to have a chat with the celestial that you dealt with a few days ago, you can do so. And it doesn't matter where they are. They can be in the heavens, they can be fighting in the abyss, doesn't matter. You cast telepathy and boom, you've got him. It is the ultimate telepathy spell, so we're going to have it work all the time. And then the final 8th level spell I dealt with was Tsunami. Now, Tsunami should be a good spell. You read Tsunami, it sounds like a reasonably good battlefield control spell. Now, as an 8th level battlefield control spell, I don't think it's overly spectacular, but I think it's fine. It's okay. Except Tsunami, for some insane reason, requires 1 minute to cast. So it can't be used in combat. And I don't understand that because Tsunami is clearly a combat spell. There's not going to be a lot of use for Tsunami except really circumstantial stuff. Again, same kind of stuff you might use Earthquake or Control Weather for, except it's not going to be as effective as those spells on that kind of thing. But in terms of combat, where you would think Tsunami is the kind of spell that you might want to use for 8th level, you can't use it because it's a 1 minute cast, which is stupid. So the simple solution for Tsunami is simply to change the casting time from 1 minute to 1 action. Now it's an okay battlefield control spell. And I didn't make any other changes to the spell because otherwise, as a 1 action casting spell, this is an okay spell for an 8th level spell. So that's it. That's all the changes I made for 8th level spells. Tune in next week for our last Treantmonk variant that will complete the player's handbook. I'm going to be looking at some revisions to previous variants. Those are going to be coming out in the weeks to follow. But 9th level spells next week will officially complete the variant. I hope you'll join me then. Until then, I am going to sit back, relax, have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everyone, and I'll talk to you next week.